Max Payne is widely recognized as a groundbreaking title in the third-person shooter genre, especially for the time. Its bullet time, feature alongside its noir, atmospheric storytelling, helped to make its legacy. However, while it's still considered an influential game, Max Payne has its flaws like old games often do, many of which have become more apparent as time passed. Despite the strengths of its combat system, Max Payne has a notable flaw in its control layout, which I'd like to talk first, particularly when it comes to bullet time. By default, players can only activate bullet time while standing still or doing bullet dodge. If Max is moving, pressing the bullet time button triggers bullet dodge move. This move has its times, but just slowing time during movement makes the game much more enjoyable. Game allows players to reassign the controls in the options menu, so they can slow down time while moving without performing the dodge. While this adjustment improves the gameplay, the initial setup is unintuitive and can disrupt the flow of combat for new players until they realize they can change it. Max Payne's introduction of the bullet time mechanic is naturally its selling point. This ability to slow down time during gunfights gave players an exciting way to engage enemies. Inspired by films like The Matrix and action scenes from John Woo movies, bullet time brought a cinematic and helpful flair to combat that was unprecedented in video games at the time. Players could leap through the air in slow motion, dodging bullets while firing off rounds with incredible precision. Enemies' reaction times are quite high in this game, so bullet time does make the game a lot easier, giving you the needed time to react to everything. Bullet time added needed depth to the gameplay. It allowed for strategic planning during firefights, giving players the opportunity to dodge bullets, evade enemy fire, and line up perfect shots. This mechanic was a huge innovation in 2001, and its influence can still be felt in modern action games which are using similar system, like Fear series.
The Finito brothers.
One of Max Payne's greatest strengths is its storytelling. Set in a dark, crime-ridden version of New York City, the game follows the tragic journey of Max Payne, seeking revenge for the brutal murder of his wife and child. The game's narrative unfolds through a combination of Max's noir-style voiceover and graphic novel-style cutscenes, creating a unique and immersive experience. The noir tone of the game is emphasized by its moody environments and Max's tortured inner monologue, delivered with a raspy, cynical edge by James McCaffrey. The writing is filled with metaphors, dark humor, and a sense of fatalism that gives the game its distinctive noir flavor. The atmosphere builds a world that feels gritty and hopeless, pulling players deep into Max's personal tragedy. Max Payne himself is a well-developed and memorable protagonist. His character is marked by his overwhelming grief and relentless pursuit of revenge, making him compelling to follow throughout the game. The writing does an excellent job of conveying Max's psychological torment, allowing players to sympathize with his dark, violent path. The gunplay in Max Payne is fast-paced and satisfying. Even without bullet time, the game's core mechanics are strong, with responsive controls and a good amount of weapons that keep combat fresh. Players can use pistols, shotguns, engrams, and more, each offering different advantages depending on the situation. Some weapons like pistols can be dual-wielded to make the experience just cooler and easier. The levels are designed to complement the gameplay, mixing tighter, more enclosed areas with few larger, open spaces that force players to adjust their strategies. While Max Payne is a linear experience, the level design works well with the game's pacing. The environments are varied enough to keep the action interesting, with moments of calm exploration giving way to explosive firefights. The game's highly linear structure also limits replayability. Once players have completed the story, there's little incentive to return, as there are little to no secrets or alternative paths to discover. While this approach helps keep the story focused, it might leave players wanting more freedom or variety in their experience. Although bullet time adds excitement to the action, the basic gameplay loop, enter a room, trigger slow motion, shoot enemies, move on, remains largely unchanged throughout the game. Max Payne is also known for its sudden difficulty spikes. Some sections of the game feature enemies in positions where they're almost impossible to avoid, leading to moments of frustration. In addition, Couple of the game's dream sequences, while visually striking, can be aggravating due to their reliance on trial and error gameplay. These sections can disrupt the otherwise steady pace of the game and lead to frustration. Max Payne was visually impressive when it launched, but its graphics have not aged particularly well. The character models are blocky, and the facial animations are stiff, making emotional scenes less impactful than they once were. But the dark, shadowy lighting contributes to the game's noir aesthetic. In conclusion, Max Payne is a game that excels in many areas. Its bullet time mechanic was revolutionary, providing players with a unique and exciting way to approach combat. The game's dark, noir-inspired story and atmospheric presentation make it a standout title from its era, and Max Payne himself remains one of the most memorable protagonists in gaming. However, the game is not without its faults. The repetitive nature of the combat, outdated graphics, simplistic AI, and control issues all detract from the overall experience today's standards. Additionally, the game's linear structure limits its replayability, and difficulty spikes can be frustrating. Despite these flaws, Max Payne remains an influential and important title in gaming history, and its impact on the third-person shooter genre can still be felt today. It also remains a good game even today's standards and can be grabbed extremely cheap.